It usually starts quietly, not with a crash or a breaking headline, but with a feeling you can't quite explain. You open your bank app and something feels off. The numbers aren't terrible, but they're not moving either. Spending feels heavier, saving feels slower, and suddenly every financial decision carries more weight than it used to. A recession doesn't always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it shows up as hesitation, and that hesitation is where most people begin to make their biggest financial mistakes, not because they're careless, but because they're reacting. When uncertainty rises, clarity drops, and the decisions you make in that moment don't just affect your money today. They quietly shape where you end up years from now. A recession doesn't create financial problems. It reveals them. The habits that worked when money was flowing easily start to break down, and the systems you never built suddenly begin to matter. The small financial decisions you used to ignore now feel like they carry real consequences. This is where the gap begins to form, not between rich and poor, but between people who react and people who are prepared. The people who come out stronger on the other side are not necessarily smarter. They are simply operating differently. They understand something most people don't, which is that a recession is not just an economic event. It is a behavioral test, and most people fail it in ways that look harmless at first. The first mistake is panic. Panic does not always look dramatic. It does not always mean selling everything or making extreme moves. Sometimes it looks like hesitation, and sometimes it looks like pulling back completely. You stop investing, you stop building, you stop making decisions because it feels safer to wait. But waiting in the wrong way, it's still a decision, and during a recession, inaction can be just as costly as making the wrong move. Instead of thinking about what you could gain, you start thinking only about what you might lose. Slowly, your entire strategy moves from growth to protection. Now, protecting your money is important, but when protection becomes your only goal, you quietly eliminate opportunity, and that is where people begin to fall behind. It is rarely because of one big mistake. It is because they stopped moving altogether. The second mistake is cutting the wrong things. When money feels tight, the natural instinct is to reduce spending. You cancel subscriptions, cut expenses, and pull back wherever you can, and on the surface, that sounds responsible. But most people do not cut strategically. They cut emotionally. They remove the things that actually support their growth, such as education, tools, or opportunities, while holding on to the things that feel familiar but do not move them forward. Cutting what is comfortable is easier than cutting what is necessary. So instead of strengthening their financial position, they weaken their future earning potential. A recession is not just a time to spend less. It is a time to spend more intentionally, because every dollar you keep or remove is shaping what your life will look like after the downturn ends. The third mistake is ignoring cash flow reality. This one is subtle because on the surface, everything appears fine. The bills are paid and income is still coming in, but underneath, the structure is not strong. Most people track how much they earn, but far fewer people track how long that money actually lasts. During a recession, that difference becomes critical. Stability is not about income. It is about durability. It is about how many months you can sustain your lifestyle if something changes, how flexible your expenses are, and how quickly you can adjust if needed. These are the questions that determine whether a setback becomes a temporary inconvenience or a financial crisis. The problem is that most people do not ask these questions until it is too late, and by then, their margin for error has already disappeared. The fourth mistake is waiting instead of positioning. This is where real opportunity is often lost, because recessions do not just destroy wealth, they also create it. Assets become cheaper, opportunities open up, and competition begins to pull back. But in order to take advantage of that, you need clarity, liquidity, and most importantly, the mindset to act when others hesitate. Most people, however, are waiting for things to feel safe again. They are waiting for certainty. They are waiting for a moment when risk disappears, and that moment never comes. The best opportunities rarely feel obvious. They feel uncomfortable and uncertain, and that discomfort is exactly why most people miss them. This is where the identity shift begins. Money is not just about numbers. It is about behavior. Two people can earn the same income and still live completely different financial lives. One reacts to circumstances, while the other prepares for them. One sees money as something to hold on to, while the other sees it as something to position strategically. Over time, that difference compounds, not just financially, but mentally. When you start thinking in systems instead of moments, you stop asking what you should do right now, and you start asking what kind of person consistently makes better financial decisions. That is the shift from reacting to operating, and from surviving to structuring. Once that shift happens, a recession no longer feels like a threat. It begins to look like a filter that separates those who are prepared from those who are not. But there is one more mistake that is more dangerous than all the others, because it does not feel like a mistake. It feels like stability. That mistake is losing momentum. It doesn't happen all at once. It happens gradually. You stop tracking your finances as closely. You delay decisions, and you tell yourself you will get back on track later. Over time, you begin to drift. This is what makes recessions so damaging for most people. It is not the big mistakes that hurt them the most, but the slow ones. When momentum is lost, it is harder to restart than it is to maintain. And by the time most people realize what has happened, they are not just behind financially. They are behind mentally as well. They lose confidence, they lose clarity, and rebuilding that takes longer than they expected. So what actually works? What allows someone to move through a recession without falling into these patterns? It is not about predicting the economy. It is about controlling your behavior. It starts with awareness, which means understanding your cash flow and knowing your numbers in a simple and honest way. Then it moves into intention, where you begin spending with purpose, cutting strategically, and keeping what supports your growth while removing what does not. Finally, it requires action, not reckless action or emotional decisions, but consistent and thoughtful movement. It means continuing to invest in yourself, continuing to build, and continuing to position yourself even when it feels uncomfortable. Because the goal is not to avoid every mistake. That is impossible. The goal is to avoid the patterns that keep you stuck. At the end of the day, a recession does not define your financial future. Your response to it does. The same environment that causes one person to fall behind can create an advantage for someone else. And the difference is not luck. It is behavior. It is awareness. It is the willingness to stay steady when everything feels uncertain. So the next time you check your account and something feels off, do not just look at the number. Look at your decisions. Look at your patterns. Look at how you are responding, because that is where your future is being built, quietly, one decision at a time.